Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Thursday, January 15th, 2026. It's 1:15 in the afternoon. And we are going to hear from the Office of the State Treasurer on something that has come up while we've been doing budget adjustments. And so we need to hear about that. So we have Tim Duggan, and do we have a friend, Jeremiah?
Yeah.
You're both welcome to come up if you want. We have chairs somewhere.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay.
As long as I'm phone a friend.
Yes, okay. And Tim, you've testified in here before, yes?
Yes.
Last week. That's right. That's right. Well, he was sitting on the side, but
Right.
now he's at the head of the table. All right, welcome. So you can start.
Great, thank you very much. And may I share my screen? I have a presentation that I was
Sure.
going to use.
Introduce yourself for the record if you don't mind.
My name is Tim Duggan. I'm the director of the Vermont Retirement Systems in the Office of the State Treasurer. And with me today is Jeremiah Breer, our Chief Financial Officer. We'll just quickly share. Great. So today, what we're here to talk to you about is the federal grants assessment. It's a tool that we use to fund the teachers' pension costs. And so what I was hoping to do was just briefly walk through what it is, why we use it, how it interacts with the funding of the pension system, and then just talk a little bit about the issue that's come up and the requests that we have for the BAA. All right, so the FGA, it started in fiscal 2016, and basically it's a charge that's applied to federal grants that fund teacher positions. So if you are a teacher in a public school in Vermont, and that position is funded by a federal grant, the salary is funded by it, we apply a charge to reflect the costs of the retirement benefit associated with it. This year, that's 25.47%. So what that means in really basic terms is if there's a teacher that's grant funded, they make $100,000, just to say, because it's a round number, then $25,000 will be the cost that of their retirement benefit that comes from that federal grant. And it was used as a way to offset the amount that the state has to come up with to fund the pension systems, because it's the state, not the school districts, that pay for the employer share pension costs. So how does it work? In our office, under Jeremiah's leadership, we set the FGA rate every year, and it's that percentage that's going to be applied to teacher salary. And it's, as I said before, it's calculated to reflect the amount that we need for the retirement costs. One feature of it, maybe it's a bug, but it's sort of a necessary component, is that we bill and receive money on a lag. And that's kind of why we're here today, because you really don't know what you're going to receive in a given year when you're setting the amount the year before as we're projecting the ADEC. So just a quick overview of how we fund the VISTERS system. As I said, the state pays the employer costs. That has two components. The normal cost you can think of as just the cost to fund this year's benefits. So people are going to be working another year. They're going to have another year's worth of service credit that they will accrue a pension for. And that normal cost reflects that amount.
I think of that as the current cost.
Exactly.
Normal always threw me off, but it's the current cost.
The actuarial terms that we use. Yeah. So it is exactly right. It's the current ongoing costs for the pension system. The unfunded liability payment, that is the amount we need to pay down our unfunded liability in a manner consistent with our existing funding policy. And as I'm sure everyone in this committee knows, that is a closed 30-year period that ends in 2038, where we will get to full funding of our pension systems. So you have those two components, and the FGA, the revenues that we get from the school systems, it offsets the amount that this body needs to come up with to fund that total ADEC, normal and unfunded. And it's applied proportionally. So the normal cost is think of it maybe about 20% rough number of the total cost, and the unfunded liability payment is about 80%. So about 20% of the FGA revenues goes to the normal cost and 80% goes to the unfunded liability, roughly. There is a third component that the that the state pays, and that's the Act 114 plus payment. As part of that pension reform legislation a couple years ago, the state committed to making extra payments on top of the actuarially determined amounts to help pay down the pension debt faster and to basically realize a lot of savings from doing so. That piece is outside of the FGA. That's just a general fund component that is a specific appropriation. So what's it look like for the current year? If you look at that column on the left, that is our total ADEC. The normal cost this year is $41 million. The unfunded liability payment is $171 million for a total of $212 million for the employer share.
Coming out of general fund.
Well, not all. The normal cost comes out of the education fund. And I think the idea there is, since it's the current ongoing costs of running the schools.
Right. It's in the right spot. But the other one comes out of the general fund.
Exactly right. And so you see in that middle column, that's the FGA, the federal grants assessment. For the current year, we were estimating $13.3 million is what we would receive. So when you apply that proportionally to the ADEC, that means $2.6 million are going to offset the normal costs. So they're saving the ed fund $2.6 million, and 10.7 offsets the unfunded liability payments. So it's saving the general fund by that amount. And just for your reference, because I know this committee loves the big bill, that's where you can find these amounts in last year's big bill.
And so the 13 million is the estimate that was put in by the administration to cover the teacher costs.
By us, I mean, we work to come up with that estimate, but it's well in advance of
actual life.
Of when it's coming in. So when Jeremiah and his team were estimating this, this time last year or even earlier, and he's only just getting the first payments. That's how much of a lag is coming in on. So that's
payments are from what time period are you actually getting payments from?
We're just getting payments now from the first quarter of this fiscal year. Because
July, August, September,
correct.
We're getting payments for the first.
Okay.
Is there a question, John?
So what's the lag? What's the?
So, well, we need to understand, I mean, it's sort of logistics. You need to know what someone's getting paid, who's working in the system. And so we have to kind of close a quarter. And then once that quarter's closed, Ryan and his team have to put out the bills, and then the schools have to have an opportunity to pay it. So, it's all very.
Yeah, it's logistics.
It's logistics, exactly right.
We're also, of course, doing the budget like a year ahead of time. So right now we have the first quarter of 2026 and we're developing 2027 budget. So that's the data we have to figure out a year from now, what the receipts are going to be.
Thank you.
Wayne, go ahead.
Just backing up a little. In your first paragraph, you talked about a teacher position to cover the retirement costs. Are you taking administrative costs coming out of that portion of it too? I assume you have to have administrative costs in order to make all this work.
Yeah, the administrative costs are part of the ADEC. So if you see, that $212 million ADEC, that includes administrative costs. Yeah. Actually, that was a change, I think, Chris maybe could help me about 4 or 5 years ago, where it used to be a separate appropriation for the administrative costs. Now we roll it into the ADEC. So like any other assumption, investments, mortality, we could either realize a gain or a loss based on whether or not we are under what that assumption is or over what that assumption is. Thank you. And now this is really the meat of what's going on here, this graph, because what it's doing is showing how we've projected the revenues going forward. That's the green bars going up. And then how revenues have come in. And you can see that, revenues have gone up steadily. I think there's a steady increase in the early years. But then obviously in 2021 through 24, that's a pretty huge increase. And that is going to be, I think, substantially due to ESSER and, programs like that, where there were a lot of teacher positions in those grants and schools were bringing on a lot, that those funds gave schools the capability to bring on new sources, and that's where they were funded. And so the FGA revenues came in associated with that.
This was pandemic related funding. There was ESSER 1, 2, and 3 to the school districts, and they were using it to hire teachers with federal funds. And I think they probably kept the teachers in some cases, but the federal funds up there.
Well, exactly. And so those teaching positions are moving into local budgets.
Yeah.
So they're out of grant funded budgets and they're into the school's local budgets. So that FGA revenue, the teacher might still be there, but the FGA revenue doesn't come in.
Because they're not federally funded anymore.
Exactly right. And, or sorry.
Did they hire those on as limited term positions or?
It depends on the school district what they did.
Okay, so they did whatever they wanted to do. Pretty much.
Well, it's whatever the towns and communities, right? That's the local control, if they voted for it or not.
Gotcha.
Yep. Lynn, did you?
Or they may have been moved.
They may not be there. We don't know what's
Yeah,
happening with
it
all
doesn't
this.
matter. Why is it,
Right.
getting the federal money?
Right, exactly. Okay.
We also heard anecdotal suggestion that I think school business officers understand a substantial charge, right? If there's a substantial charge associated with the teaching position. And if you're a school business officer, and you have a grant and you have a decision to fund a position that's not a visitor's position, like an aide, or a visitor's position, right? Which one are you going to choose? You're going to choose the non-visitor's position because it doesn't come with a 25% surcharge. So there is some thought that there may be some migration of positions, just given the rational economic signal that's coming.
Right. So we were making more than we needed for a while.
We were, and that was going to pay down anything more that came in would pay down that unfunded liability quicker. In our world, that's a good thing, obviously. But what Jeremiah was just mentioning about how far out in advance we're setting our estimates, you can see just as 25 kind of drops off a cliff as the ESSER money goes away. But we're setting the estimate based on this gigantic 24 number. And so, that's kind of how we get up to 13.375 in 2026. And then Jeremiah and his team, they realized this in the last spring. And so
Right.
We brought that to folks' attention here, and the legislature did put a $3.8 million reserve. We were actually worried last spring that the FY25, that we might not make the FY25 number. So legislature put aside $3.8 million to basically be there in case for FY25 and anything rolls forward into FY26. Fortunately, we didn't need it for FY25, so that $3.8 million is still there. But we're looking at the FGA revising down the amount we're expected to receive based on the limited sample size we have right now. And we wanted to come to you as early as possible to say this is an issue and that we think it's a good idea to add another $3 million to that reserve so that come spring, if these federal grant receipts don't materialize, we still will be able to pay the ADEC and the plus payment in full, which is an important thing for the state and its credit rating.
That's right. And it's FY26, not FY27, which is why it's in the budget adjustment. That's why you're requesting it for budget adjustment.
And you lead me into my final slide, a note about FY27. So the current projection that we're using, we have lowered it substantially to $8 million. But we need to watch it. We need to better understand what's happening this year. And we just need to figure out we're not going to be able to do that until we get some quarters of receipts under our belts. And then we'll be able to see how they're coming in and whether or not that $8 million remains reasonable or if we need to come back to you.
Well, that's a higher amount than what you think you're going to get this year. So
It is.
I would be suspicious on whether the 8 million is actually going to. So this didn't come in the normal course of budget adjustment because you didn't have a payment at that time. Is that correct?
Jeremiah can speak to when our first payments came in for this quarter.
They start coming in like December. I mean, so even at this point, in January, we have a majority of the first quarter in, but yeah, when the budget adjustment is being developed, very little data.
It's too early to do anything. Yeah. Okay.
we've been in communication with the administration about this, flagging this as an issue.
Right.
And we just wanted to make sure, I know, our treasurer, deputy treasurer sent over a memo to
Yes.
appropriations chairs. We just wanted to flag the issue as soon as we could and thought that the BAA made good sense to add to that reserve at this point, because we do think that it will be needed, but again, with all appropriate caveats, we just don't know at this point.
Sure. Okay. Great. John?
So we may get an update at some point, get a better more firm estimation.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, by the end of this month, beginning of next month, we should have, the majority of the first quarter. And then, when we get into the spring, we get into April, May, we should have like the second quarter coming in. I mean, we don't have like a full year until after the big bill is passed, but certainly the staff of the treasurer's office, I mean, we continue to monitor this and to update our projections as we go along, and happy to provide these, to the committee, if that is helpful.
No, it's just, it was explained to me this morning pretty well. Basically, a teacher who's funded by a federal grant, we're gonna have to pay their pension. But we get reimbursed for that by the federal government, and there's a part that is paid by the school board that's withheld by the teacher's salary, and part paid, employer piece is paid by the school district. And then they go and give the money to us for the pension.
Right.
Because we are technically the state's the employer.
Right.
And then the feds will reimburse the district for the total amount, and then they pay the state.
Yeah.
But we, if we don't have there's a lag, you don't have the
Right.
information, you have to put it in VA. So
This is
And
the
it's-
place.
it's a lot less than it was previous year.
Right.
It may very well go down next year's.
Right. Well, the better the administration gets at estimating,
Yeah,
the less likely it'll be. So this year, they estimated very optimistically.
yes. So we don't know, we owe more than
Right.
but we put it in reserve, so we've got that.
Exactly. But now we're gonna be needing to use it.
So does that become a transfer?
I'm seeing no from this side.
First, so my understanding is, whenever you all set aside the first amount of money, it was an appropriation, I think, the Secretary of Administration to be held in reserve so that it could be drawn upon if it is needed. So I would imagine that you would mirror a similar construct and just appropriate funds somewhere where it will sit to be spent if and when it's needed to make sure that things are fully funded.
So that makes it an appropriation from the AOA.
Any other questions on this? This makes sense.
Not the treasurer.
Maybe we could have that conversation.
Probably, this is, you also talked to GovOps, right? That's your other committee that you were, so Lynn, just, if you don't mind, just letting Matt or Lisa know, I'd say inform them at this point. You might hear from them, but I think as long as we inform them then.
We've been invited into Ways and Means next week on this topic as well.
Oh, okay.
Because of the Ed Fund.
Right.
So.
Okay.
And then just the last thing I will note, any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I will commend to you a great fiscal issue brief written by Mr. Rube that covers all this in great detail, and he just wrote it last February, and it actually, if you want to have sort of further reading on this topic in a very concise and straightforward way, this is a really great resource. So we have the link in the chat.
Is there a book version?
I think it's coming.
There is a podcast.
We need a narrative.
Chris, I think it would be great to hear your voice.
You hear enough.
Yeah, but that would be fun. Okay, great. So I'm not seeing any more questions. Thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate it. You turned that around pretty quickly for us, and we're glad. Good. So, great. So, committee, a couple of things before we take a break. Marty and I met with the chairs and vice chairs, and we went over the budget memo that you all got a copy of that we sent out to agencies in October, and we've been asking people as they come in, are you remembering about the budget? And so anyway, we went over that again. They all had it from before, but this time we also put together, thanks to James and Emily, sort of a list of questions and how to how to interview folks, to follow up on that, what we're asking them for, how to ask them good questions. So it's about oversight and accountability and transparency and really trying to understand what's going on. So it's not it's suggestions and guidelines to help people think about how to ask good questions. We presented that to them. They were very engaged. They were really happy that we did this. Thank you, guys. And James is going to just fix a couple of typos in the memo, and then he's going to send it to me. I'm going to send it to you, and I'm going to send it to all the committee members. All the chairs who will give it to the committee. So we're not expecting perfection. We're hoping for progress and better questions, and we'll all get better just as we go along. So, they aren't the only questions you can ask, but there's an idea, and you may have other ideas for this question. So it's a good start. So more to come on that. When we come back, we're going to start right at 2:00 with our security briefing. That will be an executive session. So the only people that will be in here will be us and Autumn. And I'm trying to find the language from Betsy Ann that says that we go live, say that we're going into executive session, and then it happens. So that's what we'll be doing at 2:00. And I think that's everything, unless anybody else has anything. Nope.
And then
3:15, Teresa's coming. Yes, Tom will be on the floor.
Yeah, and it's only 2 bills along.
Yeah. If you need help, just let us
I have a feeling
know.
that at the presentation, I'll be there for a while, so.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure it will go well.